is about to start. Okay, so myself is Mandira Thakur. I'm the sales head at Novos Education, and I exceed my warm welcome to each one of you joining today's webinar. We are thrilled to have Mr. Sekhar Venkatachalam, a recognized APICS master instructor and supply chain expert, to guide us through the APICS CTSC certification. Request everyone to keep themselves on mute and turn off the videos as it might create disturbance. If you have any questions, please mention it in the chat box. We will have a question and answer session after Shekhar sir walks through APICS CTSC certification. Now over to you, Shekhar sir.
Okay, thank you, Mandira. Good evening, everybody. I'm truly delighted to see this overwhelming response for participation in this webinar. I mean, at least 44 people seem to have registered themselves. I do not know how many have so far joined. Anyway, but it augurs well for this particular program, which has been conceived and brought in by ASCM. What is the genesis of this of CTSC? You know, when the pandemic struck, the entire world was stupefied into a state of shock, and globally, issues related to supply chains got referred to as the most difficult management problems to solve on this planet. Initially, of course, the blame got assigned to the pandemic for any kind of supply chain disruptions. But what people thought was when the pandemic sort of started fading away, the problems would probably settle themselves and we'd probably see a world which is going back to the pre-pandemic era. But the problems pertaining to supply chain disruptions intensified because of geopolitical tensions, natural calamities, and hitherto unforeseen issues typical of a connected world, because problem in one area of the world affects the supply chains elsewhere. So supply chain professionals realized that you have to reframe the narrative from assigning the blame to problem solving. And that was basically the genesis of CTSC when it was brought in by ASCM. So let's look at this basic. What I want to do is to sort of take you through some of the basic slides pertaining to CTSC. Also give you a flavor of the content that's involved. It would certainly, I presume this presentation would answer most of your questions. Some of the questions have well been forwarded to me already. And then if there is anything left, we could certainly continue during the question session. Now, let me start with this slide, which is basically a synopsis of capabilities aimed at by the different programs offered by AS. You're all very familiar, I'm sure, with all these foundations, certificates, starting from the bottom. You have foundations, you have certificates, you know, CLTD. It doesn't mean that it's one below the other. This is just to show that there are different ones. Each one has its own capability. For example, CLTD would give you ability to understand and evaluate the logistics, transportation, and distribution activities. CPI was more focused towards the operational activities, evaluate production and inventory activities within an organization. CSCP gave a well-rounded kind of an access to the entire spectrum of supply chain. You could actually see from the consumer, from the commodity to the consumer. Then came SCOR DS. SCOR P has been in existence for a long time. And the basic idea was that people could use SCOR as a kind of a reference library or a reference dictionary. Any process or any practice, any metric that you want to assess using, you want to assess a supply chain using a metric, you could actually access and derive the advantage of the reference to this particular tome, which is basically SCOR P. It started off. Then SCOR B got, let's say, transmogrified into SCOR DS when Deloitte worked in conjunction with ASCM and then contributed a lot in terms of converting that into a digital capability model. And that's how SCOR DS came about, which is, one step over, let's say, SCOR P. And then came CTSC. Now CTSC now focuses entirely on the transformation aspect of it, because now people have realized, as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, that it's not necessary, it's not enough if you were to understand all the processes and practices involved in supply chain, you got to be able to consider transformation of the existing activities into something which is suitable, which is futuristic and suitable as new disruptions occur. How do we overcome those disruptions and very quickly and with agility? So that's the kind of a focus thrust that transformation gives you. So people said, let's look at how we could actually, build in the capabilities required into the supply chain professionals for executing transformations. So the focus of CTSC, therefore, is to equip candidates with the frameworks, strategies, processes, and tools to effectively manage an end-to-end supply chain transformation. Okay, next question to address is, okay, all right, how does it, form a path for my career progression? So if you have to look at it, CTSC, if you look at the way that they have structured it, they've made a presentation. This presentation was an unofficial presentation which was made. But what it actually brought out is that at the leadership level, irrespective of how the other certification programs are utilized, which are appropriate to the industry, company, strategy, etc., and covering all the different processes involved, in a supply chain, whether it's planning or sourcing or transformation, which is basically nothing but making, and then ordering, fulfilling, which used to be hitherto known as the delivery portion of the order to the customer, then return processes and the orchestration, which is basically the coordination, synchronization, and enablement of all the other supply chain processes. So for all these processes, how would you like to equip your people from all the way from mid-career to experts, first line manager to senior manager? So that was left appropriate to the industry, whether you want to go pursue CLTD, because that's going to be you're basically a logistics company, or it's a manufacturing company, therefore you want to go into CPIM. That was left to the respective people. But irrespective of which rung that you're actually looking at, you're basically, when you're looking at the leadership positions, you have to have, it's now recognized that you have to have CSCP and CTS. Now, CSCP gives you a broad perspective on an end-to-end basis. You're able to understand every single nuance of the supply chain management processes, and you're able to manage, and you can actually function extremely well with just CSCP. But one step further, if you want to put yourself into a kind of position where you can think of transformational activities, you can think of bringing in new changes into the existing supply chain in conjunction with the business strategy that you have had, and to see whether the strategies itself would need to undergo a change. You've got to have a holistic perspective of the entire organization, the business strategy, and the supply chains, and possible potential transformational avenues that exist. So that is where leadership and directors will have to be now, at least will have to be familiar with this transformational aspects. And that's how CTSC is now claiming a position at that level. So when you're therefore at even a further level, you're at an overall executive level, it's now been, again recognized that it's a confluence of transformational learning program, SCORE DS. Now each one actually meshes into the other, and then finally it's CTSC is evolving as one of the preferred kind of courses when you want to equip your staff all the way from their starting positions right up to the executive level. If you have to equip them well for the final growth and for them to reach the pinnacle of their career, CTSC seems to be a very, very good path to take. So now one might wonder, is it necessary for me to take at my level when I'm just maybe perhaps somewhere in mid-career? There's no harm. It's like you're doing MBA. You're doing MBA program with a view to becoming a chief executive at some point in time, because you want to have a total comprehensive view and understanding of management aspects. So it's similar to something like that. But I feel that as a supply chain professional, if you have the capability to understand the needs for transformation and the ways that the transformation could be brought about, it's certainly going to be very helpful in your career. Okay, so let's see what actually prompted this. I briefly mentioned about this, the kind of cataclysmic disruptions that necessitated this kind of a transformation of supply chains. What are those disruptions? We talked about pandemic, geopolitical tensions, natural calamities accelerated by global warming. You have now what has happened because of the war in Ukraine. Now, in certain parts of the world, food security has been very badly affected because the grains which originated from Ukraine are no longer available. Then you have threat of economic recession globally. Inflation is a major concern across the globe. There is increased competition for talent, particularly in the in the aftermath of the AI scenario. How are the people going to make use of artificial intelligence, and how can we quickly get that brought into the system? No, so there is a thirst for talent acquisition by companies, then increased regulatory requirements, technological shifts. All of them are actually different kinds of disruptions which are coming in. So what are the capabilities that one needs to have to combat the kind of a scenario like this? A supply chain manager should continually challenge the status quo, transform the culture that exists in the organization. They should question the business models. You should reimagine and redesign your networks. You build and execute a sustainable and extended and integrated supply chain strategy. And that has, unfortunately, it cannot have any margin for error. So that's the level of accuracy that with which you have to sort of build in your own capabilities. So if you look at what are the kind of leadership attributes that one needs to develop during the course of a career, in this kind of a contextual reality, you have to become a transformational leader who's got system thinking capability. You're digitally very fluent, and you're able to seamlessly connect physical, digital, and human worlds. And you have to be adept at using the new generation tools, the data sources, and analytical methods geared to the challenges of the new norm in all types of supply chain. Whether it's a forward supply chain or reverse supply chain. Reverse supply chain is increasingly assuming a lot of importance in the context of there being a lot of reverse flow of materials, not necessarily only because of rejections or or need for disposal, etc., but it's also from the point of view of sustainability. So you have circular supply chains also attaining a lot of prominence. So how do you get the information about all this, and how do you acquire yourself? How do you acquire the necessary capabilities for dealing with this kind of transformation? And that's what CTSC is trying to sort of focus on. So how is CTSC the most appropriate program here to respond to this need? It's primarily intended for professionals who have a focus on supply chain transformation. Now, you may not necessarily need to have transformation skills when you're somewhere during the midpoint of your career, but ultimately, when you reach the top rung, obviously the question will be posed to you is, what is it that you have up your sleeve when you're confronted with kind of disruptions of this kind? And you should be in a position to, if not anything else, at least reflect, brainstorm, and coordinate people who are able to brainstorm with you on as to what is happening, which is what I think CTSC is basically bringing about. So by earning the, it's basically the program is designed to expose the candidates to the supply chain transformation body of knowledge. You have to evolve, adapt, and transform the supply chains. So when you earn these credentials, it's actually because you have, it's fairly rigorous in terms of the exam information, exam requirement. So once you pass through the exam, you are deemed to have demonstrated the mastery of the supply chain transformation framework and the best practices. I always say, as a supply chain professional, your education never ends. It just continues. It's an onward journey. But it's all a question of how you are actually landing on your feet, on both the feet, with the first mastery of the basic knowledge needed. And that's what I think CTSC provides you with. In addition, these once you have gone through these kind of credentials, it's also, again, you are deemed to have distinguished yourself with systems thinking. You have the ability to do the supply chain architecting, planning, and deployment on an end-to-end basis, and strategically bring forward your focus on business strategies as well into this. That's one thing phenomenal that I found with CTSC is that it's like almost like integrating even your MBA program into your supply chain management, because Normally, what happens as a supply chain professional, you get into the industry, you start looking at the problems, you're very familiar with, you have done all your, whether it is CPIM or your CLTD or CSCP, you have done basic certifications, which are extensive and very highly valued themselves. And because of that, you've got the basic capability to understand and execute whatever is required in order to keep moving forward and in order to have continuous improvement of your processes. But are you in a position to transform the processes, turn it on its head? Now, that is where you have to obviously look at it. What's going to be the impact of this on the basic business strategy on the basis of which we formed the company? So you have to look at the business strategy, and if required, probably you have to even look at changing your strategy, extending your business strategy. So that's the level. If you have to look at it, obviously you have to understand what are the different types of strategy tools that I have in my arsenal. So for that, it's almost like therefore integrating an MBA program also into this to the extent of rendering you the capability to understand and examine changes to business strategies. So all that is actually is what is is brought about by this. And if we were to do a due diligence on CTS, let's say I'm a supply chain manager, right? I'm mid-level manager or a senior level manager. I'm looking at it objectively, critically, and do an analysis on CTSC. I would say that it's got a built-in mechanism in the program for creating all this capability that we talked about. What is the focus of this, of CTSC? It focuses on supply chain challenges. It has to sort of equip you with capability to mitigate the future disruptions. And you should be in a position to build more robust and sustainable networks, capable of understanding unforeseen shocks, because that's the reality today. So how does CTSC create that capability? As I said, it beautifully amalgamates business strategies that you learn in the MBA program. It brings to the fore the 4 sections of the SCORE reference model, metrics which describe the process performance, define the strategic goals, processes, and their relationships, enabling which facilitate your business process improvement capabilities. Then it also brings to the fore the practices that enable you to produce significant better process performance. And you also get to define the skills and which in turn facilitate your talent management. All that you learn in a SCORE DS program. So it's almost like a confluence of MBA program, a SCORE DS program, and a transformational learning process that you get insight into as you go through CTSC. I'm not trying to sort of canvas for CTSC, but I'm trying to make a critical dissection of what is built into this. I must tell you that I was quite fascinated when I was suddenly asked as an instructor to take up this exam and say, I think all instructors going to teach CTSC in the future. We have just brought out a syllabus. Would you guys be interested in taking up the exam? I think 50% of the global instructors took up the exams, and I was one of them. So, and this was the kind of a critical analysis that I would do, and I thought I should pass it on to you. One is this. The second one, how is the content created in order to deliver on the promise? They went through an elaborate process of what is called a local job task analysis. What they did was they brought in industry transformational veterans, people who have actually got a great amount of experience in business transformations, get them together as a team along with the facilitator. And then on the basis of which they said, can we brainstorm and then cull out what are the kind of various topics that we should focus on when you're offering this program of CTS. So it became a rich source of contemporary knowledge. They said, we also looked at various kind of academia, into which we can dip into and see what kind of reference books that we can actually bring to the fore and cull the material from in order to, provide the content for CTS. So they used a fair amount of, contemporary knowledge, which I'll show you in the next slide, in another slide later. The third aspect, if you're looking at the critical analysis of this program, is the future readiness of the participant. Now, here is an executive vice president of ASCM who made a comment. She said the past few years of significant disruptions to the global supply chain has proven to supply chain leaders across the industries the importance of staying on top of the skills to be prepared for future crises as well as be ready to realign the businesses. So fundamentally, the emphasis is on transformation. So the holders of CTSC, she continues to say that they will be able to gain a competitive advantage by demonstrating their understanding of supply chain transformation frameworks and the best practices. So these are the kind of things that she is actually continuing in, and what capabilities can a candidate who goes through a CTSC program equip himself in terms of future readiness. Then comes the third one, which is growth prospects. Okay, all right, I'm going through all this. What are my growth prospects likely to be? Obviously, that's a question which will be uppermost in your mind. Individuals who have the knowledge to improve their company's competitive position and profitability by shifting operations to a more value-focused and cross-functional model. The moment you equip yourself with that kind of a transformation capability, I think any management which is now coming under the threat of the environment as it's drastically and dramatically changes, what they call as the VUCA environment: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So that VUCA environment, all firms are now combating that kind of an environment. Under that scenario, obviously a person with this kind of a transformation capability who can think deeply, make analysis, and suggest what are the possible future avenues which are open to the company will certainly be welcome. Then unique methodology, which we talked about, followed in the creating the syllabus. This is just further expansion of what I talked about, how they brought this kind of job task analysis study using the professions. They worked together in conjunction with a third-party facilitator who would identify the knowledge, skills, and tasks which are important in the practice of supply chain transformation and continuous improvement. The focus is on practice of transformation and continuous improvement. So that kind of results, when they actually pulled up their study findings, they were analyzed, resulting in a recommendation of key concepts and topic areas. And that's how the exam subcommittee brought out the final content as it exists today. So what you learn is globally recognized as the best contemporary syllabus to launch you into your transformation pursuit. And yeah, so this is the rich and varied source of knowledge into which this entire team dipped into in order to supplement whatever they brought to the fore with their own experience. There are all the different references and their authors. You see the books, you see some articles. All of them are actually, some of them are digital supply chain leadership, transformation, and then supply chain excellence. All these were extensively used, and from which the topics were culled out when this particular syllabus was prepared. Now, some of you wanted to know what is the kind of, is it possible for me to give a bird's eye view of the syllabus as it is given here? The syllabus consists of 4 modules. The first one is on supply chain transformation overview, which carries approximately about 33% of the evaluation system marks. So that means 33% of your examination questions could be easily expected from this. It's a fairly extensive module. So this encompasses the fundamentals of supply chain transformation, from knowledge of frameworks. It talks about benchmarking tools, optimization roadmap, and so you get, and you also look at it from the point of view of what kind of security and risk management considerations do you have to provide, and when you are creating an organizational transformation, and what are the key organizational drivers of supply chain transformation. So that's what is given here into further subsections, etc., shown here. And you get to know about supply chain transformations. You get a little more understanding about value propositions that you bring to that fore, and how do you use the segmentation of supply chain. Some of them you actually get to see even in for example in SCOR DS. But as I mentioned earlier, this is basically the integration of the quintessence of SCOR DS and quintessence of, let us say, something on a detailed, extensive study on strategies. They're all merged and amalgamated together in order to create CTS. So what are the unique features that you could probably look at it? They talk about, you all talked about maturity of how you progress supply chain maturity to reach a final stage of maturity, which is called the orchestration capability. Now, This is actually, obviously when you're doing a supply chain transformation, your aim is to reach that final level of supply chain maturity. So it's a beautifully, the syllabus, if you actually read it, it actually takes you beautifully towards accomplishment of that final stage of maturity. How you can actually expose your company to those practices and processes and bring up supply chain maturity. It's a brilliant exposition of different strategy tools. One might have studied strategy tools in an MBA program, but how do these strategies tools impact your supply chain? What are the kind of changes that you could probably bring about? Is there a way that I can re-examine the strategy tools that I've deployed? I might have used, for example, ANSOF product market growth matrix. Now that matrix could be, could have led me into related diversification. Now, is that sufficient, or should I go into unrelated diversification? No, those are the kind of things that you will now be able to re-examine the strategies on the basis of which the organization has evolved, and then see whether you can bring in with your knowledges of CTS, you can probably examine those and question those. Then business model operating canvas, then using SPOT DS. How DS uses a very unique track called the race track of basically the transformational process. How you engage your people, how do you define what you have to transform? You analyze the various findings that you've come across, and then you plan and then launch the final transformation. And it's not a one-way road. You complete that and then you launch, come back again, and you will do it. That's why it's called a circular racetrack form. And then you use, in the process of doing all this, you look at House of Toyota, Six Sigma, theory of constraints, TQM, all this. So it's a brilliant exposition of different capability drivers of supply chain segmentation. Then you come to the preparation of supply chain transformation. You're having understood basically an overview of transformation. Then you pick up this, and this particular module carries about 41%. Again, it's got a lot of unique features which are specific to this. You might have studied them to some extent briefly as an overview, perhaps in your maybe CSCP or CLTD or something. But here you are getting into an in-depth analysis of this, using them as transformation drivers. You use environmental scanning, even things like steeple, pestle, and all that, which one might have utilized in environmental scanning. You're now getting into a deeper analysis mode, and to see to what extent you can use that for your transformation attempts. Smart operations, responsive, adaptive, digitized, connected. How do you integrate all this into digital supply network? Now that's an important focus that's actually coming in. It's just one step up from SCORE DS. SCORE DS, you study a lot of digital focus. You come into a digital supply network, etc. But here you're using it for purposes of transformation. Then you define the different levels, match it with the organization strategic systems. Then always any development or any improvement or any transformation that you're undertaking, the journey has to look at what are the low-hanging fruits that I can quickly grab, so that it generates excitement in the process of change management. So change management is an important baseline that you will be using. You will be understanding how to use that and integrate in your process of supply chain transformation. So you have to generate quick wins, and then how do you sequence and prioritize the remaining portion of the activities with a focus on achieving what you've planned to do. So reckoning with the complexity, effort, and risk. The entire thing is painted so very beautifully. So when you read it with that kind of a great enthusiasm, as if you're going to create a transformation tomorrow, you would find that it's a very, very fruitful and an extremely good read. Apart from the fact that it's going to help you in your career. Then executing supply chain transformation. That's about 15% of the questions. Is actually how do you, having conceived of the processes, having decided on what you need to do, how do you bring forward? How do you make sure that you get into things like ATCAR, change management processes? Now, so change management is again, this is just one of the many change management process models that you actually look at. You're looking at, for example, ATCAR is nothing but awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. so that any individual or group wanting to change will have to look at all these factors. So like this, you can look at every one of the change management techniques. It's not as though you have to use every one of them. You might use probably an amalgam of those in order to, and specific to your requirement. The fact that you're made aware of these kind of different techniques, exposes you to the possibilities of how you can properly mix and match those varieties and create an appropriate change management plan to suit your organization. So it's an exemplary decomposition of to be value streams into now you really get into the process details, process elemental details by getting into SCORE and level 3 elements. So, and up to level 3 of SCORE, for those of you who might have had some interaction with SCORE, it's actually industry agnostic. It's neutral to any type of industry. When at the level 4, when you go into SCORE, it is specific to that particular industry or to your company. So up to that point, it's the decomposition process has been created so exemplarily, and I was quite fascinated with the manner in which it is dealt. And then you come to challenging assumptions through implement the governance and risk management framework. Any process, any changes that you actually bring about, you've got to look at how do I protect myself in the futuristic scenario where I could be bombarded with different kinds of threats. So how do I protect myself? What will be the risk framework that I've got to have, risk management framework that I have to have? So you're examining those as well. And then finally, you review the transformation process as you've done. So upon completion of the transformation projects, you do a careful assessment of the entire process that you've gone through, planning, designing, and execution phases. And then you look at where am I in relation to the supply chain transformation maturity. So lessons learned are incorporated to the next page or next phase or stage of a transformation. So it's a kind of a continuous cycle that it's constantly reinforcing itself in your pursuit of the transformation that is of contemporary relevance. Okay, so what are the unique features of all this? Now you observe the success through the business plan performance metrics, capability performance metrics, change management performance metrics. So you study all that and see how you can evaluate the transformational success. And it's a fantastic use of the balanced scorecard, which has been described in this. So altogether, I would say that it's very, very beautifully done. And the transformation racetrack, we talked about engaging. How do you engage the team to assess the need for improvement? How do you define? This is basically covered in SCORE DS, but it's been very beautifully embedded into the CTSC program as well. So define strategic priorities, analyze the, what you have to do, what are the root causes, what are the recommendations for improvements, what kind of value propositions you bring to the forefront. Then plan the portfolio of improvement programs and then confirm the value proposition, sponsorship and resources. So that's what basically happens, and that completes the kind of a basic presentation on what this is capable of. And then I have seen some of the questions that some of you had. I think more or less these have this presentation would have clarified on the questions raised by you. But if there is anything that is still yet to be sort of brought out to the fore, I'm quite willing to answer those questions. So can I leave the floor to you, Mandira, to take over to assess the questions and come back?
Yeah, thank you, Sekhar sir, for sharing valuable information about the CTSC certification.
Yeah.
Before we start with QA round, I would like everyone to check the link in the chat box. I'm just sending the link. So this is for the Google review. We will appreciate your feedback on how you find the webinar. Just 1 or 2 sentences will also be enough. So now we can start with the QA session. Anyone has any question can go ahead.
Or maybe let me start with the basic questions that I received. Some of them have been clarified. If that's not clarified, then you can raise further questions on that. The first one was about application and job opportunities. I presume that the moment I have shown you this, what are the capabilities that you can get by going through the CTSC program, and this, which actually takes you where in terms of your career growth pattern. I guess that automatically answers your question. So what is the application? The application is basically in transforming today's company in today's environment and make it fit enough for futuristic, progression as it takes place, particularly with all the kind of possible disruptions on the supply side or the demand side. The second question was to know more about the change management, and I think it's not a question. It's probably he's saying my interest in CTSC is about to know more about change management and transmission tools and techniques. Yes, you will certainly get to see that. I've already touched upon that. The third question was understanding. I need to understand the content and to see whether it gets aligned to my future goals. From what I have described, I presume, I don't know, it depends on where you are in your organization. And I presume that it also answers to your question, answers your questions, at least to some extent, if it's aligned to your future goals or not. Understanding the course and also the evaluation pattern. Now, evaluation pattern is something which is, it's typical of any APICS examination. The CTSC exams scale score, that range is from 200 to 350. There are 150 questions to be answered. And so below 299, if one goes, the pass mark minimum is 300. So you have to score between 300 and 350 in order to secure a pass and get yourself certified. So if it's below 300 or if it's anywhere between 200 to 299, you don't pass. So that's the kind of a score range that CTSC has stipulated. About the, so basically there are 150 questions. And these 150 questions are sort of, there is a, there are some about 20 odd pre-test questions sprinkled amongst them. They don't actually add to the total score, but they're used for statistical purposes in order to see how the students are able to cope up with the kind of questions posed in a specific fashion, and whether that can be integrated to the future questions in future APICS examinations. It's only for that purpose. But overall, this is the kind of a method of evaluation. It's not very different from any other certification programs that you have. Then somebody has asked about, has mentioned that you basically wants to have certification in order to get up to date in the market. Yes, I think it does adequately serve that purpose. Main topics and fundamentals, some kind of an overview. I presume that what I have given is sufficient. You can actually go through the exam content manual. Then get awareness on the scope of the certification. Again, coming back to the same thing as what are the possible potential opportunities. If you are, in today's scenario, particularly with people not necessarily sticking on to one job, they move from one place to the other. There is a certain amount of eagerness amongst the corporates when they recruit new managers. What is it that they bring to the table? Not merely the skills which are appropriate and adequate for the job for which they recruited, but also their ability to think out of the box and bring forth some new ideas, new suggestions for transformations. So I think from that point of view, it's going to be a great advantage in having gone through CTSC. Then there's one interesting question. How is it going to affect the path when I'm already working in automation of the supply chain? I presume that I've understood the question right. If the person who has raised this question is available here, I would like a little more clarification on what he actually meant before I attempt to answer that. Is anybody here who's raised this question? How is it going to affect the path when I'm working in automation of supply chain? The person is not here. Okay, I presume that what he's talking about is that already he's engaged in the automation of his supply chain as it exists today. I have just two observations with my limited awareness of where he is working and what kind of industry he is. I mean, virtually I have no awareness of that, but I'm making certain basic assumptions that he's working in an industry which is, fairly well equipped to undertake transformations, and also is now going ahead with maybe digitization and automation of this. Now, when you're talking about automation, I would like just to make a small distinction between, digitalization and automation. In a normal digitization, you're actually doing a digital representation of whatever you've been going through. It's basically an electronic version of, let's say, for example, creating an invoice. If on a digitalization, you go one step further. You make a previously, human-driven transaction. Now you bring it into an online one or something which can be automated. So that's essentially making it more efficient than merely restricting yourself with digitization. In the automation, what you're actually doing is you're going into the process of digitalization, plus you're redesigning the transactions to omit the need for human intervention at all, except as needed for checks and counterbalances. So what I presume is that you've already crossed the basic tenets of digitalization. You're into the arena of going ahead, completely automating the processes, eliminating the need for human intervention. If you're already in that stage, if you're asking me, how is CTSC going to help me? I really don't have an answer to that, but the only question that I will definitely say is that normally when you go into the process of automating something, you would like to automate it after you have done and make it suitable for the futuristic scenario as it emerges. Make it resilient enough, make it agile enough to meet the supply disruptions or demand disruptions. When it happens, when you're able to meet that, equip yourself with that kind of a capability, then it's fine. If you're already going through this automation process, there's nothing more that you need to learn from the CTSC program. But chances are that, invariably as it happens in industry, you would like to definitely adopt the latest technology. You would like to go for automation because the vendor is offering it. So you start off with that. And then at that time, you suddenly realize that, there are some changes which are needed. And at that time, how do you incorporate these changes into the system? Is it possible to, the vendor himself might not have the knowledge of this if he's merely bringing an electronic capability or an automation capability of the process. So you have to bring in, as a supply chain manager, your skills in terms of your skills and insights into what transformation would be needed in order to equip yourself, to probably even analyze, re-examine your business strategy, and how you, in line with that, how do you change your organization strategy or the supply chain strategy, and then effect the transformation. So you might be able to still, even in that kind of an environment, you might be able to bring forth your ideas and suggestions. People are constantly now looking at today of people who are capable of bringing in suggestions and bring in out of the box thinking. So from that point of view, I think it will be useful. So I think I have covered all the questions that have passed on to me. If there are any further questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Sekhar, yes, Shiv here.
Yeah.
I would like to understand what's the role of artificial intelligence in this transformation program. Maybe a wee bit I understood with your explanation of digitalization and automation, but yeah. I mean, under the full scope, could you please explain a bit?
Okay.
Is there any AI?
Thank you for the brilliant question. Let me at the outset declare that I'm not an AI expert, but I can definitely tell you that artificial intelligence, fundamentally, where is it that you're going to use? What are you trying to use it for? You're trying to use it to see, a plethora of data is available in front of you, which you're able to gather and garner because of your ability to, pick them up from the system that you have got. It's now got the capability to analyze the big data and bring forth all the, findings from that data onto your table. And then how do you see the relationships between them, between the different seemingly unrelated data, find patterns that could actually, for example, you might suddenly say that here is a plethora of data that I've got with reference to, say, somebody who's talking about a skin issue. I'm just drawing upon a similar kind of an analogy that I read about some time ago. Procter and Gamble, for example, when they brought out the Olay skin cream at a particular point in time, they found that they had completely misjudged the market. They thought the Gen Z would also be following the same cream as their mothers who used to buy the cream and use it for the skin applications. And they continued with that tagline of saying that, this is an anti-aging cream. It makes sure that you don't age. Now, the Gen Z said, what the hell, who's talking about aging? I'm a teenager or I'm just into my early 20s. I'm not bothered about aging part of it. I want something more than what anti-aging properties are. So it started looking for outside the Procter and Gamble arena, and they went to other manufacturers. Almost a complete decade was lost by Procter and Gamble in terms of one particular customer segment. Now this came to light only after they started interacting and finding out, examining the data, examining the social media, and looked at all the interactions that were taking place, and then found out that this is what these guys were expressing, saying that, who's interested in anti-aging? I'm interested in something else altogether. Then they had to completely redesign. So what they did was they used artificial intelligence in order to establish some kind of a pattern from the questions and answers and discussions that went through in the plethora of data that was made available to them, and then analytically dissected it and then said, what we need is a different tagline and different focus when we're talking about marketing to these kind of these youngsters. And that's how they completely change their strategy. So artificial intelligence basically that enables you, because of its electronic capability of computation, it's able to provide you with a tool to analyze and interpret data in huge forms, and seemingly unrelated patterns can always suddenly establish, and they can answer many questions of yours as they spring to your mind. Do I answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, Sekhar, if I may ask, this is Rafiq here.
Hello?
And yeah, hi Sekhar, this is Rafiq here.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Right, so I am an executive in the one of the largest logistics firm in the world. We offer 3PL, 4PL, and 5PL services.
Okay.
So we move goods for the client, and we are a multimodal service provider.
Right.
How does CTSC? Because I understand CTSC is good enough. It looks very good for a conventional supply chain manager. Okay. We are a supply chain enabling company. We're not really supply chain company. Okay. We move goods, like I said. How does CTSC help me?
It's a fantastic question. I'm not very sure whether I'm competent enough to answer that, but nonetheless, I will try. See, the thing is, when you are doing an important part of the supply chain activities. When you're doing the logistics, you're basically moving goods from one place to the other, which is important from the customer's perspective. And how quickly do you use it? What are the kind of, what is the speed with which you can execute that task which is given to you? And how do you overcome the kind of disruptions that you face in your process? Today, you are passing through, you're suddenly told us, saying that I can't go through Middle East because I've got a problem there. These Hamas terrorists are attacking our ships, that I'm going to go all around the Cape, and that's going to cost you so much additional. You're just bringing forth that kind of a number to the customer, saying that this is what I'll be able to charge you. Unfortunately, that's the only way I can manage. You have a problem in Red Sea, they'll come up with similar kind of a scenario. Or you have a problem of finding containers, as it happened in the case of, all the containers got locked up with goods. When China did the complete closure on Shanghai, the prices went through the roof. What is it that you, as an important arm of the supply chain, what is it that you were able to bring to the fore in order to see the customer's distress and see whether you can actually do some activity outside the box, and think outside the box, bring some activities to the fore that would enable you to bring down the cost of transportation. Ultimately, what happened? The cost of transportation came down, I think, eventually by itself, and not necessarily because any special activity indulged in by any of the top logistics providers. To that extent, maybe when you look at this, when you study CTSC from a different perspective altogether, from a seeing of supply chain end-to-end basis, and seeing what is the kind of nucleus role that you play in terms of logistics service, Is there a way that you can actually improve your own service? Maybe you'll be able to come up with some better ideas after you expose yourself to, what kind of strategies does your company as a logistics company follow, and how that strategy can be meshed with the supply chain strategies of not only yours, but also your partners in the progress. Because ultimately, when you deliver the goods to your customer becomes an extended arm of yours, because until the product reaches your customer and he is satisfied with it, your service that you're provided, your logistics operation is not efficient enough. Have I answered to some extent at least? Is there anything that is there anything that
Sekhar, close, because see, let me be honest. What I see this as CTSC for me would be that if I were to, let's say, venture into some kind of a consulting, I mean, my company would want to venture into some kind of a consulting on the supply chain domain to our prospective clients or even the existing clients, then yes, it's a big deal for me, CTSC.
Okay.
Alternatively, CLTD is a gem for me.
Yes, see, CLTD gives you, obviously, CLTD is the one which is directly related to what you're doing as an operation. There's no question about that. Now, I'm assuming that you've already done your CLTD because you're already in this field. So now we are looking at additional, the next step of your growth of career to reach the pinnacle of your career. I think CTSC would be a great help.
Yeah, thanks, Sekhar. Yeah, I mean, from not only my personal career perspective, I'm looking at it from the value add that I can bring for the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I do it.
Yeah. Thanks, Sekhar.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Sekhar sir, we have two questions in the chat box. So first is from Mr. Vishwanath. He is asking, is it
Yes. Your voice is muffled. I'm not able to hear you properly. I don't know. When the others speak, I'm just fairly clear, but somehow we have. Can you repeat that again, please?
Sir, there are two questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
First, from Mr. Vishwanath. He's asking, is equivalent to CSCP?
What?
Is it equivalent to CSCP?
Is it equivalent? No, see, no, you can't equate one course to the other. Now, if you're talking about CSCP gives you, as I said in the beginning itself, it gives you a complete bird's eye view of the entire spectrum of supply chain, all the way from commodities to the consumer. The entire supply chain, you fully comprehend what are the various activities involved, processes involved, etc. But does that give you the ability to sort of analyze and see whether you can make transformational changes into the existing processes? Now, unless you get into the processes in greater detail, and unless you arm yourself with the kind of, the information that CTSC provides, for example, exposure to SCOR, exposure to the different processes under SCOR, or different practices under SCOR, different talents that you can actually, harness, it's going to be very difficult, just with the CSCP knowledge alone. So CSCP is good, comprehensive, as is also shown here in the slide. Even up to the director's level, or even right up to the executive level. But if you're coming at the question of transformation, CTSC is an additional, thrust that it provides you with in terms of transformational capability. It's not exactly the same. Each is not equal to the other. Yeah, what's the next question?
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Rajesh B. He is asking, in his organization, he is handling procurement activities for the project, and he has done CSCP, which helps him to have an view in supply chain. But how can CTSC?
I missed that portion of it. From what I hear is that he's in the field of procurement and he's already done his CSCP. So, what is the next question?
So, how this CTSC certification helps in his career?
CTSC in his career as a procurement person.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Now, you see, it's when you're looking at, if you are asking specific reference to a specific function, it's very difficult to answer, because when you're looking at CTSC as a transformational tool, you're looking at the entire organization. You're not looking at specific procurement activity. You're looking at it, maybe you're today, let's say you're in procurement and you've got sources developed in China, sources developed in Taiwan. And now how vulnerable are you to those, to the disruptions of procurement from those sources? What can you do in terms of overcoming those disruptions? So how do you prepare yourself with alternative sourcing capabilities? What are the things that you got to examine to make sure that that alternative sources remain, at least for some extent, they are for some time, they remain, they work along with your existing sourcing sources, and you continue the process without disrupting your existing, organizational progress. But what you need to do is you have to see procurement is the one which got immediately affected when the pandemic hit, for example. Every buyer in the world was in a quandary, because he was expecting containers to arrive from China. They stopped arriving. He was expecting material to be, let's say, coming in from different parts of the world, and they were not coming in because people were not even operating their factories to produce those materials. So what does the buyer do in such cases? In this case, it was all totally unanticipated. Now you've come to a stage where, as a procurement specialist, I know that as a procurement specialist, as probably a person who has done CSCP, you're familiar with risk management as a process. But risk management as a process, you're familiar, you know what you need to do. Now, CTSC probably goes one step further in terms of saying that, what are the other, things that you could do? Do you have to just merely look at sourcing as alternative sources, or would you have to look at probably, why don't you look at a make or buy scenario and even bring it in-house, especially on critical components? Well, does it tie up with your business strategy? If your business strategy is to produce one of lowest cost, and on that, because of that strategy, you've gone and sourced it from China, and you can't match that kind of a cost even if you produce it in-house, then you got to look at the entire changing of that strategy. Do I have to continue with that business strategy of being a low-cost producer? Should I look at myself as equipment, going ahead with a differentiating capability? So what kind of other capabilities can I develop? So you look at the whole thing holistically. And now when you look at it, you not look at it just as a procurement specialist. You look at it as an important key player in the organization who is in charge of sourcing and procurement. So, if you ask me, so therefore, in my future growth, is it going to help? I cannot obviously tell you right now that it's going to help. But the moment you develop that kind of a mindset, that you can look at every single activity that you have in your umbrella, is there a way that I can find an alternate? I do. You have to look at, when you look at developing a transformational capability, you're looking at all different aspects of it, including, things like your supply chain maturity. How do I make sure that I make use of my partners, better use of my partners? What kind of collaborative endeavors that I can actually do in order to develop, give myself a transformational capability? So you look at it as actually as a different picture. So I would only look at it, from that perspective, that I develop my overall knowledge and equip myself in a kind of a futuristic direction. Any other question? No?
Sir, this is Ketan. Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Sekhar sir, no question, but I just wanted to, thank you for this great session. I hope you remember me. I was a part of your first CPM batch in Eton, Pune.
Oh, okay.
So it's nice to hear you back after almost 4 years.
Very, very nice to have you back. That's wonderful. Yeah, I do remember very fondly of our interactions at that time.
Yes, yes, yes. We had a story, right? We had one.
Yeah,
Right, right. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And
you're
I'm definitely
welcome.
looking forward to this CTSC certification because I'm currently working with Ernst and Young, EY,
Oh, fantastic.
the
Okay,
technology consulting stream and
great.
managing large-scale transformation projects. So definitely,
Oh, wonderful. So I
yeah,
look forward to learning a lot from you.
my place.
Okay,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, if there are no other questions, will we close, Mandira?
Just a minute.
Right now, sir, Mr. Sumit has put two questions.
Okay.
First is, what is the difficulty level of the exam in terms of time? How many months of preparation will it take? And the second question is the
Yeah.
cost of the certification.
Second is what? Second question is?
See, second question is, what is the cost of the certification? So I would
Cost
like to
that
inform Sumit.
you would have to provide the cost. I have no
Yes.
knowledge of the
Yes,
cost.
yes, yes.
So,
So, Sumit sir, I have shared the contact details in the chat box. You can connect further afterwards, so we can guide you further about the cost and how the preparation you have to do.
okay. As far as the complexity of the exam is concerned, the person who's asked this question, has he done CSCP or CPM or one of those certifications? Is he there?
Yes, he has done CSCP.
Okay, he's done CSCP. Okay, fine. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's more complex than CSCP. I mean, the CSCP is a very vast syllabus. CTSC is almost equally vast, and it takes you into different kind of spheres of activities in terms of, as I talked about, business strategies. How do you explore every one of those strategies? You could probably spend some time on it in terms of understanding the strategy if you're not exposed to it already. So therefore, when you look at business strategies or when you look at SCORE, now if you're not done SCORE, now you don't get into that kind of a detail about SCORE in CSCP. But here in SCORE, you have to definitely understand when you get into SCORE, just as like you are doing SCORE DS program, you have to get into the details so that you are very, very clear on, what are the, when you're level 1, level 2, level 3 and of processes and level 3 metrics. What are the different metrics? What do they mean? So that requires a fair amount of, exposure to SCORE, which means a fair amount of study of SCORE. And so when you bring in all this together and then transformational process itself, when you're going through, it's again, you've got to blend to some extent SCORE and the leadership capability, the hunt for talent, practices, people's skills, all that will have to be studied. So there is a fair amount of extensive study involved. I would imagine that you would probably have to spend the same kind of time that you did on CSCP preparation. If you had spent 100 hours in CSCP, same kind of preparation, 100 hours of CTSC would be needed. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So I think we should close the session right now. And
Okay.
I would like to inform we will be having our next webinar on 17th May. The topic will be tips on how to prepare for ASCM certification exams. So we will look forward for everyone to join for the same. Thank you all for joining today. If you have any further questions or queries, please do reach out us. The contact information is mentioned in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Vandira.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandira. Thank you, Sekhar.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.